So you've been teaching for how many years together? Over 20 years already?
Actually over 25. We discovered the other day when I was talking to a member of the staff at Juilliard. So I started really young. And if you remember, I think, were you at Juilliard in 93, 94 at that time?
Yes, I think, yeah.
You were there because that was the first year they started the Starling Fellowship. Remember, Miss DeLay started the Starling Fellowship in 93 and yeah, 93 to 94. And Robert Chen and I were the first two Starling Fellows. And that program still goes on. So I've had some former students of mine and current students have that fellowship since. And and I remember how shocked we were because we were, 23 years old. And she says, I'd like you to start teaching. And I remember I was thinking, oh, I don't think I've really taught before. How am I going to teach your students? And she's like, and she would just smile and look at me. She's like, oh, Sugar Plum, you learn by doing, or something like that, that I translated in my head. And we would meet every week, actually, to talk about teaching. And it was so fascinating because she gave me some really great advice at that time. And then she gave me four of her students and she says, okay, you're going to work with them every week. And I did that for 2 years. And then a pre college faculty position opened up 2 years later. And then she says, I think you're going to like teaching. So she basically gave me that job at Juilliard in the pre college. And then that's how it started. And I started teaching and I started, teaching more students, and started doing the college. But those meetings with her, Dima, were so interesting because she would tell so many stories about her students in the past to show me how you can't just teach by book. You have to keep an open mind. And I'm sure so many, right, of your guests have said this about her, that it was really important to teach each person uniquely.
Yeah, I think it was her strength. She was able to acknowledge certain strength and perhaps weaknesses in every student,
Mm-hmm.
to see how one can engage both qualities so they can work together. So it's it's I think it's very important to know one's strength, not only certain things one needs to improve, but to know why one has special voice or special talent, and what is this, what comes natural, and perhaps other things needs to be work in terms of to supplement that talent. And of course everyone has a absolutely different angle in doing what we do. It's why it's so wonderful. Our profession has so many different way of explaining and then interpreting the music, and it's a collaborative process because we learn from each other. We learn from the recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the recordings somehow sometimes can, or live performances, of course, it's the most inspiring thing. But even during this Zoom webinars, for me and I'm sure for many other people, it was really fascinating to see how every distinguished guest was able to maybe to open up a little different way of perceiving even the same pieces, or the process. And I have to tell you that your session was really something I didn't expect. It was very fascinating, and I'm looking forward talking to you more about the way you develop this kind of approach, and definitely watching this one more time so I can really expect certain things and try to follow your instruction, because it seems like your students are perfectly in tune what you're saying them. It's wonderful that you're able to create this kind of common ground, which is really, it's not very direct and play this way or that way. You just suggest things, and they enjoy trying and experimenting, and it's, I think it's very special process you create with the students. So I wanted to ask you, perhaps maybe you can share something else about Miss Delay, some of the stories, something which really comes to your mind. Because you spent, how many years did you spend? When did you started studying with Miss Delay?
1988. I studied with her for 8 years, and then I started teaching as her assistant pretty much right after that. So and basically till she passed away, I feel like we kept talking and working and discussing students. And I have some very strong words that are in my head all the time. Talk about inner ears. Like I can't get her voice out of my head. Certain things she would just say. For example, she would say, if somebody was behaving not well to her, like a parent, she said, if a parent of a child, pre-college student, isn't behaving well, just remember, there's a little sickness in there, so they're not well. And that's all she would say. She'd just look at me, and then I would go, but what do you mean by that? And I would argue and argue and argue and argue, and she would just sit there and smile and not say anything else. Or she would say, remember, actually, one of my favorite memories, and I've told all my students this story because it's so good. When I was a student, I played Paganini 9 for her. And at the end of the lesson, it was a midnight lesson. And I'd been waiting for hours for my lesson. And it was like a short lesson. And she closed the music. Or no, she actually said to me, oh, the notes are out of tune. So I put arrows up and down on them. So, look at the music. And she's like, there's an arrow on almost every note. And she closed the music and handed it to me. And I went home crushed. And then I realized it was her way of saying, you need to listen better. You need to do better with your listening, because I had worked really hard on it. I thought it was good. That was that. But then when I started teaching, she gave me a very different story, which was she had a student who would never lift their violin off. It was always down here, hair covered. They wouldn't look up ever. And I actually ended up with a student exactly like this. And she said she tried everything. I tried to this way, that way to get him to hold the violin up, wouldn't do it. So she said, so after the 8th or 9th lesson, came in, and I said, oh, it's just wonderful. You're holding your violin up so well. And she said she never had to say it again. And fascinatingly, in my first year of teaching, I ended up with a student exactly like this. Mm-hmm. And I was tearing my hair. I couldn't figure out a way to inspire them to not, literally be staring at the ground while they were playing. And I remembered that story. And so after the 8th or 9th lesson of tearing my hair out, I decided to try it. And of course it worked. And I called her right away. I said, well, Miss DeLay, I begrudgingly tell you that you were right. And I used to argue with her so much when she was alive. And of course she was right about all the advice she gave me, but I was so young and stupid and I wasn't listening. And I was just arguing a lot. But I guess it forced me to think about things and grow up eventually and learn for myself.